Officers sometimes will ask trick questions. We've talked about this before. They'll come up and they'll say, "Well, how are you doing today?" And if you say, I'm a little tired, just nothing big," but then they come back and they give you a driving fatigue violation. And so, you know, I'm doing great. How are you doing? It's a beautiful day, whatever, but then being cooperative is really important because, the old, I pay your salary doesn't fly very well.
Well, guys, our topic today is the do's and don'ts of traffic stops. And we've talked about this before, but this is something that's incredibly important because a lot of what happens afterwards, a lot of what happens in terms of the end results and the effect on drivers, really depends on how the driver handles things at that stop. I'm wondering, Alex, if we can start with some of the basic things that you want to make sure you do.
Absolutely. Well, there's a couple things. There's before the stop and then at the stop. And before the stop, you need to know that you have all the documentation in your possession. And that's you can't do that after the stop. I mean, you can't find out, oh, I didn't have this. Well, sorry, or you're going to get written up on a violation. And so that's the preparation. Is always the most important thing. But as I always start out whenever I'm talking to a driver or you guys, is breathe. You pull over. It's not a traumatic event. You're not getting pulled over and arrested for murder. It's a traffic ticket. And you got to calm yourself down. And really, I tell carriers they really need to teach this to their drivers. Explain to them how to interact. um, don't don't come charging out of the door and attacking the officer verbally or something like that. And that happens more than you would expect, or maybe not more than you would expect.
Well, you mentioned having all your documentation in order. Very quickly, what type of documentation are we talking about? What things need to be at the ready and easily accessible?
Sure. Well, any permits, any your BOL, any of the documentation of the trip. If you've had to use paper logs, you have those organized. And then, like, there's an IFTA receipt. You have to have a registration, proof of a prior annual inspection, things like that come up. Oh, also, there's supposed to be instructions on how to send ELD information, and a couple of other things surrounding that.
Yeah, and of course, that's one of the big things with ELDs is, of course, when you had paper logs, you had paperwork you could hand over immediately.
Right.
Um, is this the type of thing where it really is a good idea to have some kind of printing device there in the truck connected to the ELD? Or I remember when these first came about, there was a lot of talk about having a built-in function to email them to an enforcement officer. So, kind of
Right.
what is the situation now?
Yeah, yeah, it's still the same. It's still the same way there. I don't really know about printing out. It might help the officer, but usually what you do is you now email them to the FMCSA. There's a specific email address, and then the DOT officer can access it from there.
Okay. There's also some basic stuff there. I would think your CDL, your medical card, and
Yeah,
basic vehicle registration information.
right, right. You do need that on hand, even though they're also going to check online with various agencies for for that. You have to have your med card attached at the DMV, to your license. And if it's not, then that's a major violation, and they'll put you out of service until you can prove. But then they'll put you back in service if you have the information in your truck. They'll at least put you back in service, but then you'll still have a violation.
Okay. What about drivers who haul hazmat? Because I know that brings up a lot of potential additional situations, but I would suspect that there is some information you'd have to have ready if you haul hazmat. What type of information is important to have on hand if you're one of those drivers?
Well, again, particularly there, if it's needed permits for the hazmat that you're carrying, and then also what you're carrying, because there's all kinds of different, hazmats. Um, I am not I am not a really great expert on the hazmat. We don't work with that very much. I mean, it's a pretty specialized, but I do know that you need to also log it in correctly. There comes issues when you're carrying something and you don't think it's hazmat, like batteries. We see it with batteries a lot. Different kinds of batteries are hazmat, and other kinds of batteries, regular, store batteries aren't hazmat. Um, so that's probably the main thing that I know about it.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about things involving you in the vehicle when you are pulled over for a stop. As someone who hasn't driven truck, who drives a car, I've always been told that you need to have the wallet out. You don't want to be reaching for something in what looks like a hidden area the officer can't see. You want to have your hands on the steering wheel where the officer can see them. Walk us through some of that with truckers. I mean, what types of things are important for them to have kind of set up and ready after they get pulled over?
Yeah, that's a good question. The again, the documentation, of what we went through earlier, and I agree. I think it's no different when I've gotten stopped. I roll down my window. I actually hold my hands out the window with my documentation that's needed. I don't I don't wait until the officer gets there to roll down my window, because, well, first of all, I've had cops as friends, and one of the worst times for them is stopping somebody, um, walking up to their car is even, traumatic. But think about this, you have to step up right to, that little step there to be able to even see in. So anything you can do to make the officer feel more comfortable, and and don't take any advice from Tyreek Hill. I don't know if you saw.
I haven't seen the video.
Oh my gosh. He's got his windows are all blacked up, and he rolls them back up and won't roll them down. And they ended up pulling him out of the car. That's probably not necessary to this. But I mean, that's just one of those things where he's all excited right from the beginning and angry and asking questions. So if you want to know what not to do, look at that video.
Well, and I think also in this case, because we are talking about someone driving commercially,
Yeah.
being polite, being professional, being cooperative, only answering the questions with what information is being asked for, not volunteering a lot. I mean, that's all important as well, isn't it?
Right, right. Officers sometimes will ask trick questions. We've talked about this before. They'll come up and they'll say, "Well, how are you doing today?" And if you say, I'm a little tired, just nothing big," but then they come back and they give you a driving fatigue violation. And so, you know, I'm doing great. How are you doing? It's a beautiful day, whatever, but then being cooperative is really important, because, the old, I pay your salary doesn't fly very well. And with tickets or with an inspection, I mean, look, if you get mad and an officer gets mad, they're going to find stuff. And they're gonna work on that truck till they do find stuff. And if you get a ticket, the officers have a lot of a lot of chops with the prosecutors and the judges, and so they'll be more likely to show up, and they'll be more likely to discourage the prosecutor from making a deal. If you're, if you go in there and you just be a jerk to them. Or I actually had a driver who told the officer he was not going to help in any way his investigation. And, and the officer's like, what, do you have something to hide? And he's like, no, I just don't feel like I need to do your job for you. Yeah. How do you think that one's going to turn out?
Yeah, and honestly, um, you don't have to volunteer stuff, but there's no reason to set that aggressive tone.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Well,
definitely in the list of don'ts.
and sometimes I do understand that sometimes officers having a bad day can come up and be aggressive as well. But meet their aggression with just yes, sir, no, sir. How can I help?
There's a couple of minutes left here, Alex, and I wanted to discuss some of the don'ts because we've really been talking mainly about do's. But you know, unfortunately, lately in scrolling through social media, I'm getting a lot of videos, and a lot of them, I don't know why I'm getting these. Maybe it's what I search for, but I'm getting a lot of traffic stops, and I see people do stuff that's like basically assuming this is all done and I'm free to go and just taking off. And inevitably, those end up with the officer rushing back to their vehicle and chasing. So I assume, that's a pretty
Yeah,
obvious don't. But what are some
right.
of the others that you need to keep in mind?
Well, again, like I said, don't wait till the officer gets there to get your information. Um, don't don't get out of the truck. I mean, not until he asks you to get out of the truck. Don't turn off the engine or idle it down, or however exactly that goes. Um, but if the officer says, take your keys out of the ignition, take your keys out of the ignition. Don't say why. Don't say why do I. Because I'm an officer, I stopped you. If it's something outrageous, of course, you may push back. Um, the so I'm not really sure. I mean, there's just so many different things, but it's mostly about for drivers, commercial drivers. It's about being aggressive with the officers. They're scared, and then that brings out that that fight or flight, and usually it's the fight um, type of response.
Okay. Well, is there anything else? We just got a few seconds left, Alex. Anything else that you want to add on this?
Um, Maybe not an ad, but it's just be polite. I mean, there is nothing good. Okay, so you got a good zinger in. Well, okay, that guy might have. I mean, we see all the time that the officer, you're speeding 75 in a 55, 70 in a 55. They may write 75, but then lower it, say to 65. We see that a lot of the time, and the guy that gets that treatment didn't come out and say, "I pay your salary."
There you
So
go.
it's just good to be nice.
There you go. Alex, thank you very much.
All right, thanks.